The morning light poured gently through the kitchen window, touching the stack of textbooks and a half-finished sketch of a tree on the table. 16-year-old Ashley Coleman sat quietly, tying her sneakers, her backpack slouched beside her chair. Her mom, Linda, moved briskly around the kitchen, refilling a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. "Don't forget your jacket," Linda said, glancing out at the cloudy Raleigh sky. "They're saying it might rain later." Ashley smiled faintly. "I'll be fine, Mom. It's just a few clouds." It was a normal Wednesday. At least, that's how it began. Ashley left for school like she always did, waving goodbye from the front porch, the air thick with early spring humidity. She didn't know it would be the last time her mother saw her. At Millbrook High School, Ashley blended into the hum of teenage chatter and lockers slamming shut. She wasn't the type to stand out, smart, artistic, but quiet. Her best friend Megan Ross often joked that Ashley had an old soul, more likely to spend an afternoon sketching in the park than gossiping in the cafeteria. By the final bell, dark clouds rolled over the parking lot. Ashley had stayed late finishing an art project. When she finally stepped outside, the bus had already left. She sighed, watching its yellow blur disappear around the corner. "Great," she muttered. She reached for her phone, no missed calls. She could walk. It wasn't far. Just under 2 miles through familiar streets lined with oak trees and red brick houses, she pulled her hoodie tighter and started walking. A few minutes into her route, a drizzle began to fall. She passed the gas station, waved at the clerk she knew, then took the wooded shortcut she'd walked dozens of times before. Birds fluttered above the wet branches. Her sneakers splashed softly against the pavement. Her phone buzzed, a text from Megan. "You get home okay?" Ashley typed back, "Walking now. Missed the bus again, LOL. That was 4:22 p.m. At 4:37 the rain grew heavier. A neighbor saw her near the intersection of Ridge Road and Forest Glen Drive, holding her backpack above her head. Another witness later recalled a red pickup truck idling nearby, engine running, wipers swiping steadily against the windshield. By 5:15, Linda Coleman began pacing her kitchen. Dinner simmered untouched. She tried calling her daughter, straight to voicemail. Once, twice, 10 times. She called Megan, then the school, then the police. By 9 p.m., officers were combing through the area with flashlights. The quiet Raleigh suburb, usually filled with the sound of cicadas and laughter, was now silent except for the rain. "Ashley," voices echoed into the dark. "Ashley Coleman." Her phone stopped pinging at 4:41 p.m. The last signal placed her near the old pedestrian trail behind the neighborhood. Then, nothing. Somewhere out there in the rain-soaked woods, the light in Ashley's world went out. If you've been drawn in by Ashley's story, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life mysteries that deserve to be heard. By sunrise, the Coleman's quiet street had turned into a command post. Patrol cars lined the curb, radios crackling as officers moved in and out of the house. The air was heavy with dew and dread. Linda stood at the doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching strangers tape off the woods at the end of the road. Detective Harrison, a broad man with tired eyes, approached her gently. "Mrs. Coleman, we're expanding the search perimeter. We'll need a few of Ashley's things. Clothes, maybe her hairbrush." Linda nodded, her voice barely a whisper. She's never done anything like this before. Never. By mid-morning, local news vans began to arrive. Reporters spoke into cameras just beyond the police line, the words "missing teenager" echoing across the airwaves. In Raleigh, a city that prided itself on safety and southern calm, a missing 16-year-old was front-page news. At Millbrook High, students gathered in tight circles, whispering fragments of rumor and fear. Megan Ross sat at her desk, her eyes fixed on her phone scrolling through Ashley's last text. "Walking now, missed the bus again, LOL." She read it again and again, hoping to find something she'd overlooked. During lunch, a teacher approached her. "Megan, the police might want to talk to you later today." Megan nodded numbly. "I'll tell them everything I know." Outside, flyers were already going up, Ashley's school photo, her name in bold letters. Neighbors joined the search teams, carrying flashlights and calling her name through the woods that bordered the subdivision. "Ashley! Ashley, can you hear us?" As night fell, the sound of helicopters throbbed above the treetops. The hum of their rotors mixed with the distant barking of search dogs. The once familiar streets of Raleigh now looked foreign, swallowed by flashing lights and anxiety. At the Coleman home, Linda sat with Detective Harrison and his partner, Officer Miller, at the kitchen table. A half-eaten casserole, dropped off by a neighbor, sat untouched between them. "Mrs. Coleman," Harrison said softly, "we're checking all possible angles. Friends, school, anyone who might have had contact with Ashley recently. Does anyone come to mind?" Linda shook her head. She kept to herself mostly. She had Megan, art club, that's about it. Miller scribbled notes. "Did she seem upset lately? Any arguments?" Linda hesitated. "No. Well, she and Tom had a disagreement last week about curfew. But that's just normal teenage stuff." Harrison's gaze flicked toward the hallway, where Tom Coleman stood leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Outside, a reporter's voice carried faintly through the window. "Community members say they can't remember the last time something like this happened in Raleigh." At 11:47 p.m., the first day ended, with no trace of Ashley. The woods had been searched, the ponds checked, the streets canvassed. Nothing. Detective Harrison closed his notebook. "We'll pick up again at dawn." Linda stared into the darkness beyond her porch, her hands trembling. Somewhere out there her daughter was missing, and the longer the silence stretched, the more the town began to fear that Raleigh would never be the same again. 2 days after Ashley's disappearance, the Coleman house no longer felt like home. It felt like evidence. The smell of coffee mixed with the faint trace of disinfectant from the officer's gloves. Every sound, every question seemed to echo off the walls. Linda Coleman sat at the kitchen table, clutching a crumpled tissue, her face pale from sleepless nights. Detective Harrison placed a recorder between them. "Mrs. Coleman, we're just going to go over a few details again." "Sometimes little things mean more than we realize," Linda nodded. "I understand. Tell me about the last time you saw your daughter." "She was leaving for school. She smiled, said she'd see me for dinner, that's all." Her voice broke slightly. "She always came home." Tom Coleman, standing by the window, sighed heavily. "You've already asked that, Detective." Harrison's tone stayed calm. "And we'll keep asking until we understand what happened. I need to confirm, where were you the afternoon Ashley went missing?" Tom crossed his arms. "At work. I manage the auto shop over on Glenwood Avenue. My guys can vouch for me." Officer Miller looked up from his notepad. "You left at what time?" "Left early, around 4:30, wanted to beat the traffic." Linda glanced up sharply. 4:30? You told me you worked until 6. Tom's jaw tightened. "I did some paperwork at home, that's all." Harrison exchanged a quick look with Miller before switching off the recorder. "We'll verify everything. For now, please stay available." When the detectives left, silence filled the room. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a camera flash went off. Reporters still camped on the sidewalk. Linda turned toward her husband. "Why didn't you tell me you came home early?" Tom rubbed the back of his neck. "Because it doesn't matter. They're treating me like a suspect, and now you are too." "I just want the truth," she whispered. That evening, the story dominated the news. "Family under investigation as search continues for missing Raleigh teen." The headline played on every local channel. Comment sections buzzed with speculation. Neighbors who once waved at the Colemans now crossed the street to avoid them. Megan Ross watched from her bedroom, tears streaking her face. Her mum tried to turn off the TV, but she couldn't look away. "They're blaming them," she said softly. "They don't even know what happened." Across town, Harrison reviewed statements in his office. The inconsistencies bothered him. Tom's early departure, the missing half hour before he claimed to arrive home. Still, nothing concrete tied anyone to a crime. Meanwhile, volunteers searched farther into the woods. Every twig crack felt like a heartbeat of hope, but each night ended the same, with no answers. By Sunday, exhaustion had replaced panic. Linda stopped opening the door for reporters. She sat in Ashley's room, running her fingers over the sketchbook left open on the desk, a drawing of the trail where her daughter was last seen. In the margin, Ashley had written in pencil, Sometimes silence says everything. Linda stared at the words, her heart twisting. For the first time, a thought crept into her mind she couldn't shake. What if Ashley had known she was being watched? And what if the person watching was closer than anyone dared to believe? By the end of the first week, Raleigh buzzed with speculation. The neighborhood Facebook groups lit up with theories, each one more dramatic than the last. Some said Ashley had run away. Others whispered about the red truck. A few pointed fingers directly at her own family. Truth blurred into rumor, and fear fed on itself. Detective Harrison knew the danger of public opinion. He'd seen it before, how gossip could destroy a family faster than any crime ever could. But he also couldn't ignore the inconsistencies in Tom Coleman's story. He leaned back in his chair, flipping through the report again. 4:30, he murmured. If he left work early, why did no one see his car on Ridge Road? His partner, Officer Miller, shrugged. Maybe he's telling the truth, or maybe he's smarter than we think. Meanwhile, Linda sat alone in the living room, the TV muted but glowing with her daughter's picture. She could almost hear Ashley's laugh in her mind, the sound haunting in its innocence. Each new rumor on the screen felt like another wound. When Tom walked in, she didn't look up. Did you talk to them again today? He sighed. Yes, they asked the same things. Again. And? And nothing's changed, Linda. They've got no leads, no witnesses, just us. Her tone hardened. Maybe if you'd been honest from the beginning. Honest? His voice rose sharp. You think I had something to do with this? Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't answer. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Across town, Megan scrolled through online threads, her hands shaking. A classmate had posted, I heard her stepdad was acting weird that day. Another replied, they say she was seen arguing with someone near the woods. None of it was confirmed, but it spread like wildfire. At school, whispers followed her down the hall. Didn't you text her that day? What did she say before she disappeared? Megan stopped answering. Every question felt like an accusation. That night, the local news station aired a segment. Was Ashley Coleman's disappearance really a kidnapping or something closer to home? The anchor's tone was calm, almost sympathetic, but the implication was clear. Linda turned off the TV and sat in the dark. For the first time, she wondered whether her husband was hiding something from her, or if she was simply losing faith in everyone. Detective Harrison's phone buzzed with a call from a witness. I saw her, the woman said breathlessly. The day she went missing, near the park, there was a red truck, older model, maybe a Ford. She looked nervous. It was the first real lead in days. Harrison grabbed his coat and nodded to Miller. Let's check it out. As he drove through the quiet Raleigh streets, he couldn't shake the thought that everyone in this case was lying about something, big or small. And the truth, somewhere beneath all the noise, was waiting to be unearthed. 3 weeks before Ashley disappeared, spring had just started to bloom across Raleigh. The air smelled of honeysuckle and rain, the kind of weather that made everything feel alive again. Ashley spent her afternoons sketching in the backyard, headphones in, her pencil gliding over paper as if she were trying to capture the entire world before it slipped away. Her mother often watched from the kitchen window. You could sell those drawings one day, Linda said once, leaning in the doorway. Ashley smiled. Only if someone wants pictures of trees and skies. They're not just trees. They're how you see things, Linda replied. That's special. But beneath her calm exterior, Ashley had been uneasy. It started with little things. Feeling watched on her walk home, a strange car idling near the corner, her phone buzzing with blocked calls that stopped the moment she answered. She told herself it was nothing. Still, she began taking different routes home from school. One afternoon, while at her locker, she found a folded note tucked between her books. It read, I see you walking every day. You should smile more. No name, no handwriting she recognized. She crumpled it and tossed it away, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Later that evening, she brought it up to Megan. It's probably just some dumb kid, Megan said, trying to sound reassuring. You know how people mess around. Ashley nodded, but she didn't believe it. It didn't feel like a joke. Around that same time, tension at home had been growing. Tom Coleman's patience had worn thin. Work stress, money problems, or maybe something deeper. He started snapping at the smallest things. One night, Ashley came home 10 minutes past curfew. Tom was waiting in the living room. "Where were you?" His tone was flat, but his eyes sharp. "Just at Megan's. We lost track of time. You think the world stops because you do?" He stood, towering over her. "You follow the rules in this house." Linda stepped in quickly. "Tom, please, she's just a few minutes late." Ashley's throat tightened. "I said I was sorry." Tom exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Go to your room." As she turned to leave, she heard him mutter, "You're just like your mother." That night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with a feeling she couldn't name. It wasn't just fear, it was distance. Her home didn't feel safe anymore, and she didn't know why. In school she tried to act normal, but her sketches changed. Trees became darker, their branches reaching like claws. Her self-portraits were shadowed, eyes glancing sideways as if expecting something or someone to appear. On the Friday before she vanished, she told Megan quietly, "If something ever happens to me, promise you won't forget." Megan laughed, confused. "Ash, nothing's going to happen." Ashley forced a smile, closing her sketchbook. "Yeah," she said softly, "nothing at all." And that was the last time she mentioned feeling afraid. By the second month, the flyers on every light pole had started to fade. Rain blurred Ashley's smile into streaks of ink, and the wind tore at the corners until they flapped lifelessly in the breeze. The town that once buzzed with energy now moved in hushed tones, as if speaking too loudly might shatter what little hope remained. Detective Harrison sat in his unmarked car, engine off, staring at the case file. 2 months, he muttered. Not a trace. The passenger seat was cluttered with coffee cups and crumpled reports. Miller leaned against the hood outside, arms crossed. "You ever get the feeling we missed something?" he asked. "Every damn day," Harrison replied, closing the file. "But the trail's gone. Whoever took her knew what they were doing." Back at the Coleman house, Linda sat at the kitchen table surrounded by casseroles dropped off by well-meaning neighbors. Most were untouched, congealing under plastic wrap. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through Ashley's old texts. There was one unread message from the night before she vanished, a number she didn't recognize, just one word. Wait. She'd shown it to the police, but the number was untraceable. Could be a burner, Miller had said. Could be nothing. But to Linda, it felt like a clue the world had decided to ignore. Megan visited often, her guilt written all over her face. "I keep thinking maybe she texted me for help," she said one afternoon, voice shaking. "Maybe she wanted to tell me something." Linda forced a faint smile. "You were her best friend, honey. She trusted you. None of this is your fault." But in the quiet hours, even Linda doubted her own words. The community's energy dwindled. The search parties became smaller, the volunteers fewer. The TV crews packed up their equipment and moved on to other stories. Only a handful of people still showed up every weekend to look through the woods, mostly out of loyalty, not faith. One rainy evening, Detective Harrison walked through the Coleman backyard, now overgrown. Linda stood on the porch. "You think she's still out there?" she asked, her voice hollow. He hesitated. "We don't stop looking until we know for sure." That night, the police announced a shift in focus. The case was officially being classified as cold, meaning active investigation would pause unless new evidence emerged. The words hit the Coleman family like a hammer. Tom stormed out of the meeting, anger radiating from every step. "Cold? My daughter's not cold." Harrison sighed. "It doesn't mean we're giving up. It means we're regrouping." But to Linda, it felt like the world had just moved on without her. At school, a memorial was held for Ashley. Balloons lifted into the sky, drifting out over the city skyline. Megan watched until they disappeared, whispering, "Come home, Ash." And somewhere in the crowd, Detective Harrison stood alone, hands in his pockets, staring at the fading horizon. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought followed him long after he left. Sometimes the hardest part isn't not knowing where she went, it's realizing no one's coming to look anymore. 10 years passed. The world moved on, but for the Colemans, time never healed, it only hardened. The missing posters were long gone, but the shadow of Ashley's disappearance still lingered over Raleigh like a permanent storm cloud. The house on Maple Hollow Lane looked the same from the outside, but inside everything had changed. Linda Coleman lived alone now. The walls once covered in family photos were bare except for one, Ashley's senior portrait, framed above the fireplace. Tom had left 5 years after the disappearance. The marriage simply couldn't survive the weight of unanswered questions. Linda had found a kind of purpose amid her grief. Every morning she brewed her coffee, opened her laptop, and checked her inbox filled with messages from other parents of missing children. She'd started a small advocacy group called Light the Way NC. They met once a month in a church basement, where she shared Ashley's story to remind others that hope, even when dim, could still burn. People admired her strength, but at night when the house went quiet, she still whispered her daughter's name into the dark. "Good night, Ash," she said every evening, as if the words might travel somewhere beyond the silence. In downtown Raleigh, Detective Ava Monroe flipped through cold case files stacked high on her desk. A recent transfer from Charlotte, Ava had a reputation for persistence. She studied faces, timelines, maps, reading until the ink seemed to blur. When she reached the folder labeled Coleman Ashley, 2001, she paused. The case file was thin, the photos faded. 23 years old, she murmured, tracing Ashley's picture with her finger. 16 when she vanished. Detective Harrison's name was listed on the report. He'd retired 3 years earlier. Ava decided to call him anyway. "Detective Harrison, this is Ava Monroe with Raleigh PD. I've been reviewing the Coleman case." A long sigh came through the line. "You're digging up ghosts, Detective. That case was dead before you were on the force." "I don't believe in dead cases," she said, "just overlooked ones." Silence stretched for a beat. Then Harrison chuckled softly. "So you sound like I did once. Good luck. You'll need it." Ava closed her laptop late that night, but something about Ashley's face stayed with her, the eyes, alive with quiet strength. She wrote one note in her journal before leaving for the night. Every trace leads somewhere. Meanwhile, Megan Ross, now 26 and a teacher, stood in front of a class photo on her desk. Her students had asked once about the girl in the picture. "She was my best friend," Megan had said simply. That evening she received an email from a local news outlet. 23 years later, will Raleigh ever get answers in the Ashley Coleman disappearance? She hesitated, then clicked it open. The story mentioned a new detective assigned to the case. For the first time in years, Megan felt something she hadn't dared to feel since high school: hope. And across town, under the soft hum of her desk lamp, Detective Ava Monroe reopened the Coleman file and whispered, "Let's find you, Ashley." Detective Ava Monroe stared at the lab report glowing on her computer screen. The DNA sample from Ashley's old backpack, sealed since 2001, had finally been reanalyzed using advanced forensic genealogy. The results didn't name a suspect, but they did something equally powerful. They linked the trace DNA to a family line in North Carolina. She leaned back, heart racing. "After 23 years," she whispered, "we've got something." Ava printed the report and drove straight to the evidence warehouse, a windowless building that smelled faintly of dust and metal. Officer Jenkins met her inside. "You really think there's anything new in a bag that's been sitting here for decades?" he asked skeptically. "I don't think," Ava replied, snapping on gloves. "I know." She opened the evidence box carefully. Inside lay a faded backpack, blue canvas with a small tear on the side. Among its contents, a sketchbook, a broken pencil, and a hairbrush sealed in a separate bag. The report indicated the DNA had come from that brush, not Ashley's but someone else's. She turned to Jenkins. "Whoever this is, they were close enough to touch her belongings." That same afternoon, Ava visited Linda Coleman. The house hadn't changed much since the last report she'd read. The faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. Linda greeted her at the door, cautious but composed. "Detective Munro," Linda said softly. "It's been a long time since anyone from the department came by." "I know. But I'm reopening Ashley's case. New technology is giving us chances we didn't have before." Linda's hands trembled slightly. "Do you really think you can find her?" Ava looked her in the eyes. "I think we can find answers." They sat in the living room. Ava unfolded a photograph of the backpack. "Do you remember if anyone else had access to this?" Linda shook her head. "No. It was always in her room. She took it everywhere, school, the park, art club." She paused. "Tom once tried to fix the zipper. Why?" Ava hesitated. "There's a partial DNA profile from the hairbrush inside. It doesn't belong to Ashley." Linda's face went pale. "Do you mean Tom?" "I'm not saying that yet," Ava said carefully. "The sample only gives us a family match, not a name. But it's someone connected to the Coleman circle." That night, Ava returned to her office and ran the genealogy report through the national database. The system blinked as it searched, cross-referencing family trees. When the results loaded, one name repeated through several matches: Mathers. Ava frowned. "Who are you, Mathers?" She dug into old records. In the original 2001 investigation, a neighbor named Eric Mathers had been briefly questioned but never charged. He'd moved out of Raleigh just weeks after Ashley's disappearance. Ava scribbled the note in her pad. "Re-interview Eric Mathers, now primary lead." She sat back, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. For the first time in decades, Ashley Coleman's case had a pulse again, and somewhere out there a man who thought he'd escaped his past was about to find out the truth had finally caught up to him. Detective Ava Munro's office was dim, the glow of her computer screen reflecting off the wall of cold case photos. The name Eric Mathers blinked on her monitor, pulled from the old 2001 witness list. He'd lived just 2 houses down from the Colemans back then, a quiet man in his 30s who worked maintenance at a nearby church. Ava tapped her pen against the desk. 2 houses away, she murmured, and nobody followed up. The next morning, she visited Linda Coleman again, this time with a small folder under her arm. Linda poured coffee, her hands steadier than before. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "Possibly. Do you remember a man named Eric Mathers, lived near you back in 2001? Linda froze. "Eric? Of course. He helped Tom fix our fence once, always polite, kept to himself." "Why?" Ava opened the folder, revealing an old photo of Mathers, smiling, sunburned, wearing a church volunteer shirt. His name came up in a DNA cross-reference. "To nothing conclusive yet, but he's connected through genealogy to the unknown sample from Ashley's backpack." Linda's face paled. "You think he had something to do with her?" "I think he deserves another look." After leaving Linda's house, Ava stopped at the local records office. Mathers had no criminal record in Raleigh, but something caught her eye. He'd moved suddenly in June 2001, just weeks after Ashley disappeared. His new address was 2 counties away. Meanwhile, Megan Ross was at home grading papers when she received an unexpected call. "Megan Ross," a woman's voice asked. "This is Detective Munro. I'm reopening your friend Ashley Coleman's case. I'd like to talk about the weeks before she went missing." Megan's breath caught. "It's been so long," she whispered, "but I still remember everything." Later that afternoon, Megan sat across from Ava in the precinct's conference room. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup as memories flickered like lightning behind her eyes. "She was scared before she disappeared," Megan began. "She never said why, but she told me she felt watched, and one day she mentioned someone kept showing up near her bus stop." "Did she ever say a name?" Megan shook her head. "Just that he drove a red truck, an older one. I didn't think much of it back then." Ava leaned forward. "A red truck was reported near the intersection where she was last seen." "Does the name Mathers mean anything to you?" Megan frowned. "Eric Mathers? He used to help out at the church by our school. I saw him a few times, but he was just the maintenance guy. Everyone liked him." Ava's pulse quickened. "Was he ever around Ashley outside of school?" Megan hesitated. "Once. She mentioned he offered her a ride home after she missed the bus." Said it was awkward but harmless. The words hit Ava like a jolt. She said that? Yes, why? Ava closed her notebook slowly. Because 23 years later, his name just came up again. And as the weight of that realization settled in, both women sat in silence, aware that the truth they were circling might be darker and closer than either of them had ever imagined. The rain hadn't stopped in days when Detective Ava Monroe got the call she'd been waiting for. The forensic genealogy lab had traced the DNA match from Ashley's backpack to a direct relative, a niece of Eric Mathers living in Virginia. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to reopen the case officially. Ava hung up the phone, adrenaline rushing through her veins. "We've got him," she whispered. Within an hour, she and Officer Jenkins were driving through the slick roads toward Mathers' last known address, an aging farmhouse tucked between pine trees 2 counties away from Raleigh. The GPS flickered as they turned onto a gravel road. "You really think he's been hiding out here all this time?" Jenkins asked. Ava kept her eyes forward. Not hiding. Just living like the world forgot. At the station, she'd pulled his record again. Mathers had changed jobs repeatedly, never staying anywhere longer than a few years. Maintenance work, church repairs, construction, always just enough to keep moving. He had no social media, no family nearby, and a spotless record. On paper, he was invisible. When they arrived, the house looked ordinary. Fresh paint, trimmed lawn, even a small American flag on the porch. But Ava's instincts buzzed. "This place is too clean," she muttered. They approached quietly. The woman who answered the door was middle-aged, polite but guarded. "Can I help you?" "I'm Detective Ava Monroe, Raleigh Police Department," Ava said, flashing her badge. "We're looking for Eric Mathers." The woman's expression faltered. "Eric? He's my uncle. He doesn't live here anymore." "When was the last time you saw him?" "Last summer. He came by to fix the barn roof and left after a few days. He said he was heading back toward Wake County." Ava's pulse quickened. "Do you know where in Wake County?" She shook her head. "He mentioned something about renting a place near Falls Lake." Back in the car, Jenkins looked over. "So now what?" Ava started the engine. "Now we find him." 2 days later, a search warrant led them to a small property near Falls Lake, registered under a different name but paid for with Mathers' old bank account. The cabin was empty, but what they found inside wasn't. In a locked storage trunk sat items that made Ava's stomach twist. A collection of newspaper clippings about Ashley's disappearance, an old camera, and a worn leather keychain engraved with the initials A.C. Jenkins exhaled. "This is it. This ties him to her." Ava stared at the clippings, her chest tightening. "He's been following the case all these years." She took a deep breath and whispered, "He wanted to be reminded." That night, Ava sat alone at her desk, reviewing the evidence photos. The rain outside echoed like a steady heartbeat. Every case she'd ever worked had led her to this moment, the one where the truth finally begins to surface. And as she looked at Ashley's faded photo, she knew one thing for certain. Eric Mathers hadn't vanished into the background. He'd been waiting for someone to find him. The warrant came through at dawn. The early light over Raleigh was grey and heavy, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. Detective Ava Monroe stood in the hallway of the precinct, vest strapped tight, the air thick with quiet urgency. Jenkins handed her the case folder. "You ready for this?" She nodded. 23 years is long enough. The raid team assembled outside a small property near Falls Lake, a modest cabin hidden behind a row of overgrown pines. It matched the utility bills and property records tied to Eric Mathers' alias. They moved in silently, boots crunching over damp leaves. Ava approached the front door, raised her voice firmly. "Eric Mathers, Raleigh Police Department, open the door." No response. Only the rustle of branches and the faint hum of cicadas waking in the distance. She gave the signal. The door splintered open. Inside, dust floated in the air, illuminated by beams of morning light. The space was cluttered but eerily organized, tools hanging in perfect alignment, a coffee mug still half full on the counter. Then, from the back room, came the sound of movement. "Hands where I can see them!" Jenkins shouted. A man stepped out slowly, grey hair, lined face, eyes calm but hollow. Eric Mathers. "You have a warrant?" he asked, voice steady. Ava held his gaze. "We have your DNA, we have your storage trunk, we have 23 years of silence. You're under arrest for the disappearance of Ashley Coleman." Mathers didn't resist as they cuffed him. "You've got no idea what you're talking about," he muttered, though there was no conviction in his tone. Back at the precinct, the interrogation room buzzed with tension. Mathers sat across from Ava, wrists chained to the table. His demeanor was eerily composed, like a man who'd been waiting for this moment. Ava slid a photograph across the table, the faded image of Ashley smiling in her school uniform. "You knew her. You offered her a ride the day she vanished. Witnesses saw your truck." He didn't look at the photo. "She asked for help," he said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to go that way." Ava leaned in. "What way, Eric?" He stayed silent, staring at the floor. His reflection in the metal table looked almost like another person, older, defeated but not remorseful. Outside the room, Jenkins watched through the glass. "How you think he'll talk?" Ava crossed her arms. "He already is." Word spread through Raleigh before the press release even hit. "Arrest made in the 2001 disappearance of Ashley Coleman." The headline flashed across phones and televisions, sending shockwaves through the community that had long stopped hoping. Linda Coleman sat on her couch, hands trembling as she read the article. Tears welled in her eyes. After all these years, there was finally a name, finally a face. But as she looked out the window toward the quiet street where her daughter once played, she whispered, "Why now? Why after all this time?" And somewhere in the evidence room, Ava stared at the sealed box marked Ashley Coleman and wondered the same thing. What kind of man hides the truth for 23 years, and what else was still buried in the silence he left behind? The interrogation room was silent except for the faint buzz of the overhead light. Detective Ava Monroe sat across from Eric Mathers, her notepad untouched, her gaze steady. Hours had passed, but he hadn't said a word beyond the occasional sigh. He looked smaller now, the weight of time and guilt pulling at his frame. "You know," Ava began softly, "silence won't make this go away. Ashley Coleman deserves the truth. Her mother deserves it." Mathers' eyes flicked toward the photo of Ashley on the table. For the first time, his expression shifted. Regret, faint but real. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered. "Try me," Ava replied. He stared at his cuffed hands. "She missed her bus that day. I saw her walking in the rain. I'd given her rides before, nothing strange about it back then. Everyone knew me around the neighborhood. I was the guy who helped with fences, mowed lawns, fixed things. She trusted me." Ava's voice was quiet but firm. "So what happened, Eric?" He swallowed hard. "She got in the truck. We were talking about her art. She showed me a drawing she'd made of the woods behind her house, said she liked the quiet there." He paused, eyes glassy. "But I said something stupid, about how she looked older lately. She got uncomfortable, asked me to stop the truck." Ava leaned forward. "Did you?" His jaw tightened. "I did. She opened the door, got out, and she slipped on the mud. I tried to help her up. She screamed." His breathing quickened. "I panicked. I grabbed her arm to keep her from running, but she fell again, hit her head on the rocks by the ditch." He looked down at his trembling hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear to God I didn't." Ava's voice was steady, but there was no sympathy in it. "And then, I didn't know what to do," he whispered. "I carried her to the truck, drove out to the old service road by the lake. It was dark by then. I thought, if they found her near home, they'd know it was me." Ava's stomach twisted. "You hid her body." Mathers nodded slowly, tears streaking his weathered face. "I buried her near the waterline. It was raining so hard that night, I thought everything would wash away, but it never did. It stayed here." He tapped his chest. "Every day. Every night." Ava pushed the photo toward him. "She was 16. You took her future away." "I know," he whispered, "and it's eaten me alive for 23 years. When Ava stood, she said only one thing. "You don't get to call that guilt. You call that justice delayed." Later, as she stepped outside into the cool night air, the sky was streaked with the faint light of dawn. In that quiet moment, Ava knew this confession wasn't closure, not for her, not for Linda Coleman. It was only the beginning of understanding what had been lost. And in Raleigh, word was already spreading. Ashley Coleman had finally been found. By morning, the news had spread like wildfire. After 23 years, missing teen Ashley Coleman's case solved. Suspect confesses. The headline flashed on every TV in Raleigh, and with it came a wave of disbelief that rippled through the town. For 2 decades, people had whispered theories and pointed fingers. But now there was a name, Eric Mathers, and a confession that reopened old wounds everyone thought had healed. Downtown, the local diner buzzed with conversation. Old-timers who remembered the original search shook their heads in quiet shock. "He was just the church handyman," one man said. "Fixed my porch once. You'd never have thought." "It's always the ones you don't expect," another replied. In the high school where Ashley's photo still hung in the hallway, teachers gathered in the break room, their voices hushed. "I taught her art class," one whispered. "She had so much potential. It feels unreal." At home, Megan Ross sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. She'd watched the press conference twice already, unable to look away as Detective Ava Monroe detailed the confession. Megan's hands shook as she texted Linda, "I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. I never stopped thinking about her." Minutes later, Linda replied simply, "Thank you. She's finally coming home." But for Linda, peace didn't come easily. She walked through her quiet house, the same one where Ashley had once laughed, painted, and slammed doors in teenage frustration. Every corner was a reminder of what time had stolen, yet knowing the truth, finally knowing, brought a strange kind of stillness. When Ava visited her later that afternoon, Linda opened the door without hesitation. "You did it," she said softly. Ava shook her head. "He did. I just listened long enough." They sat in the living room, sunlight cutting across the old carpet. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Linda whispered, "All these years people looked at me like I was broken, but now I think maybe I was just waiting for her to be found." Ava nodded. "Grief doesn't go away. It just changes shape." Across town, the story dominated every conversation, every social feed. Some people expressed outrage, others sorrow. For the older generation, it was a haunting reminder of how easily evil could hide behind ordinary smiles. Megan drove to Falls Lake that evening, where police had confirmed remains were being recovered from the area Mathers described. The water glistened under the fading light, calm and indifferent. She whispered, "We found you, Ash," and placed a single wildflower at the shore. Back at the precinct, Ava watched from her office window as the sun sank below the Raleigh skyline. Jenkins entered quietly. "You should go home, boss. You've earned it." She didn't look away from the window. "The hardest part isn't finding the truth," she said. "It's learning how to live with it." In Raleigh, the night settled heavy and quiet, as if the entire town was exhaling for the first time in 23 years. And though justice had finally come, the silence it left behind felt almost as loud as the day Ashley disappeared. A week after the confession, Raleigh began to feel different. The tension that had hung in the air for decades had lifted, replaced by something quieter. Grief, yes, but also release, the kind that comes when the truth finally stops hiding. Linda Coleman stood before a small crowd gathered in the city library. A banner behind her read, "Light the Way NC Foundation, Honoring Missing Children." The organization she had started years earlier, once a flicker of desperation, had grown into a network that helped families across the state. Now, it stood as part of Ashley's legacy. She took a deep breath, her voice steady, though her eyes glistened. "For 23 years, I woke up not knowing if my daughter was scared, cold, or alone. That kind of pain changes you. But today we have her name back. Her story doesn't end in fear, it ends in truth." The room fell silent. A few parents in the front row nodded through tears. After the event, Megan approached her, holding a framed print of one of Ashley's sketches. "I kept this all these years," she said quietly. "She gave it to me the week before she disappeared." Linda smiled softly. "She'd be happy you still have it." Megan looked down at the drawing, an open field under a sunrise. "I think she'd be happy you never gave up." That afternoon, Detective Ava Monroe visited the memorial site near Falls Lake. A gentle breeze rippled across the water. She placed a small badge-shaped pin next to the flowers. Jenkins joined her, hands in his pockets. "You ever get used to cases like this?" he asked. Ava shook her head. "You don't, but you learn to carry them." He nodded slowly. "You gave them peace." "No," she said. "Ashley did." In the months that followed, the Light the Way Foundation gained statewide attention. Linda appeared on morning shows, speaking not just as a grieving mother, but as an advocate for hope. Her quiet strength inspired others who were still waiting for answers. At the police department, Ava was promoted to lead the new cold case division, focused on unsolved disappearances across North Carolina. In her office, she kept a single photo pinned to the corkboard, Ashley's yearbook picture, smiling faintly as if still watching over them all. Sometimes late at night, Ava would glance at it and whisper, "We did it." Meanwhile, Megan started a scholarship fund at Millbrook High School for students pursuing art, naming it the Ashley Coleman Creative Grant. On the first day of applications, she sat in the empty art room and said softly, "You're still inspiring people, Ash, you always will." Raleigh had changed since 2001. New buildings stood where old ones once were, but Ashley's story had woven itself into the city's history, a reminder of how one person's truth can echo for generations. And though the pain would never fully fade, neither would the light Ashley left behind. The day of the memorial was bright and windless, as if the world itself had paused to listen. After 23 years, Ashley Coleman was finally laid to rest. The service was held in a small chapel on the edge of Raleigh, surrounded by oak trees and soft spring air. People filled every pew, friends, neighbors, officers, and strangers who'd followed her story for decades. Linda Coleman sat in the front row, her hands folded tightly around a small white rose. For years she had imagined this moment, what it might feel like to finally bring her daughter home. But now that it was here, words failed her. There was only the slow, steady rhythm of her heart, the echo of prayers, and the quiet hum of forgiveness. When it was her turn to speak, she stood at the podium and faced the crowd. "For so long," she began, her voice trembling, "I prayed that one day I'd know the truth, and now I do. But the truth isn't what heals you. It's what you do with it afterward." She looked toward Ashley's framed photo resting beside the casket. "My daughter's story doesn't end here. It lives on in every family who refuses to stop searching, in every light that keeps shining for the missing." Tears filled the room, but there was warmth in them, a shared understanding that grief could transform into something enduring. After the service, Ava Monroe approached quietly. "You don't owe anyone anything anymore," she said gently. Linda smiled faintly. "I know. But I still have something to give." She handed Ava a folded piece of paper. "It's a list of other cold cases in our area, families who still need someone to listen." Ava accepted it with a nod. "Then we'll keep listening." Outside, the sky stretched endless and blue. Mourners placed flowers by a simple headstone engraved with Ashley's name and the words, "Forever loved, finally found." Megan lingered at the edge of the crowd, tracing the carved letters with her fingertips. "You got your peace, Ash," she whispered. "And maybe now so do we." As the guests drifted away, Linda stayed behind a moment longer. She knelt beside the grave, setting the white rose on the soil. "You're home," she said softly. "You can rest now." That evening, the sun dipped low over Raleigh, casting long golden streaks across the quiet streets. Detective Ava Monroe stood on the old trail where Ashley was last seen. The woods were peaceful now, filled with birdsong and rustling leaves. She closed the final page of the case file and whispered, "Case closed." For a long moment she stayed there, listening to the wind. It carried the faintest sound, like laughter, distant and light. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was something more. Back at her car, Ava looked into the rearview mirror and said almost to herself, "If you followed Ashley's journey, remember, truth takes time, but it always finds its way home." And as the screen fades to black, one last message echoes naturally, Subscribe for more true stories that remind us. Even after years of silence, hope never truly disappears.